Yesterday I made a video discussing the pronunciation of Hakari, and I got a lot of comments across all my platforms adding to that discussion, which makes me really happy. So today I'm going to do something a little bit different and add on to this conversation by replying to some of those comments, giving some back and forth, and also giving you some background information about me, that way you know more about myself and my perception. In France we say it like you, I didn't even know that people said it differently. A curious thing is that Spanish has sounds very similar to Japanese, and as a native Spanish speaker we say Hakari. As an Italian native speaker, the reason why I can pronounce it correctly in Japanese is because both languages do actually read the alphabet in the same way. So yes, I got a lot of comments similar to these, and you're correct. A lot of your languages have very similar vowels to Japanese. And one thing I learned growing up is that if I were to ever look at another language or try to pronounce a word in another language, I would be much better off thinking about it in Japanese or Spanish rather than thinking about it in terms of speaking it in English, pronouncing it in English. In terms of my linguistic background, I only speak English fluently. But I grew up doing Taekwondo, so I was exposed to Korean. I learned Korean with some friends. I learned a little bit of Japanese. I learned Spanish for like 7 or 8 years. My best friend was a linguistics major. I played music. So pitches, rhythm, different sounds are all things that I think about constantly. I grew up around a lot of people who didn't speak English as a first language, so I'm always thinking about how language changes from person to person, how communication changes from person to person, how we interpret and understand things differently, how culture and language impacts the way we think and process. And that is partly why I made my video yesterday, to kind of show that there are multiple ways to approach a word, and we shouldn't bully people for how they say something. Which brings me to the next comment. A lot of people know English speakers, which is perfectly correct. I'm an American, I speak American English, and a lot of my comments in the audience comes from the USA. I'd say like roughly 50% on some platforms, but not always. And unfortunately, those may be the loudest and most ignorant voices when it comes to Japanese culture, language, and nuance. When I'm not creating content, I'm talking to my friends and I'm venting, one thing I bring up is how annoying American English speakers are. When people leave comments on my videos, I can't always tell what their ethnicity and background is, but when people discuss how I say things, I can almost always tell if they're American. Monolingual American English speakers lack the empathy of knowing what it's like to speak multiple languages. They lack the humility to know that there's things that they will never understand or comprehend because of their lack of language training. And they lack the ear training to be able to hear different sounds, and so they will be very cocky and aggressive when there's something that they can't comprehend. I have a mutual who's German, and she made a video about Kenjaku, and she speaks multiple languages, and so she pronounced the name as Kenjaku, or something similar to that. And multiple people were coming into her comments making fun of her, asking why she pronounced it correctly, and derailing from the entire conversation. And when she was talking to me, she's like, I didn't say Kenyaku, right? People are thinking that I used a Y sound. And I had to explain to her that no, they're probably American English speakers, they probably have never heard a soft J in their life, or whatever you want to call it, and they are probably freaking out because they just can't comprehend what you're saying. And that's something that I experience quite often. I'm sure other people in the world who aren't American English speakers have experienced as well. I'm not Japanese, so I will pronounce in English. I've started deleting and blocking comments like this because even though I believe in freedom of speech, if you're just gonna waste my time and derail from the conversation and be obtuse, then you're out of here. Which is unfortunate because every now and then someone really did misunderstand the video while watching the entire video, or they just have really bad tone, or English is not their first language. But for the majority of people, they are just being obtuse and are wasting my time. Someone tagged Matcha Samurai and asked if he could confirm. This is not the first time someone has tagged someone in my videos and tried to fact check me, and I'm not offended by it. I will say hopefully Matcha Samurai can understand my video in its entirety and not nitpick and derail like some people have. Some people thought the point of my video was me to tell you that you're only allowed to say Hakari in one way. Some people think I was trying to flex my Japanese. Some people thought that it was like some sort of perfect Japanese lesson, when really I was bridging gaps and adding information so that we could appreciate a character and a language a bit more together. And this makes me think about the lack of nuance in online conversations, and how every now and then I would get a comment of someone saying, well, I live in Japan, I know that you're saying Hakari incorrectly. And it's often someone who's like studying or learning Japanese. And my thought process is, yes, maybe you are currently learning Japanese in a very organized situation and you're living in Japan. But I have been thinking about language and linguistics and nuance and communication for over a decade. So if you cannot comprehend why I say the things I do the way I do, you need to go back to the drawing board before you attack me. I'm not saying Matcha Samurai will, I'm just saying hopefully he does not view this as me trying to give the perfect Japanese lesson, and he views it as me bridging gaps. Even with this breakdown, they'll still be annoying snobs, which is true, but now I can simply copy and paste a link to my video whenever someone gets snarky, or I can simply delete and block them without feeling bad, or I can have these fun conversations with people who actually care. Random pet peeve, but I'm so glad you brought it up, is when people mock Asians for mixing up R and L when they wouldn't be able to pronounce Japanese Anyway, your pronunciation is great and I speak Japanese. Thank you, Dot. So this comment is basically talking about the L and R sounds and how they don't exist in Japanese. Not really. And so people will often, going back to how American English speakers are very mean, make fun of people for the way they're pronouncing things without realizing Japanese people have to learn new sounds to speak in English. And again, people who only speak one language will never understand what it's like to have to learn a new sound to speak a new language, to have to learn a new culture to speak a new language, to have to process your thoughts differently to speak a new language. I always pronounce the names how I hear them. I find it weird when you listen to it and say it differently. And this person was not saying you as in me, they mean you as and people in general. So this also ties into empathy and learning different languages and understanding how we process language. So on one hand, yes, I'm like, hey, if you hear something, just break it down and try your best to mimic it. But on the other hand, the languages that we're exposed to determine how we think, the sounds we can make, the sounds we can interpret, and even how we learn to sound things out in school can determine how well we are at mimicking other languages. Currently, there's a major education crisis in the US, and there are people who are on my platform who definitely are a direct product of that education crisis. So if you've been exposed to multiple languages as a child, if you've learned multiple languages as an adult, if you've taken time to learn about linguistics later on, all this stuff will come easier to you. If you are a product of America's failed education system, if you've only spoken American English, if you've only spoken English, it's going to be a lot harder for you to mimic other languages because you just don't have the training, you don't have the ear, you don't have the processing, you don't have the exposure. So I'm always thinking about multiple scenarios when I read comments. I'm trying to think about the person's background, I'm trying to think about the words they say, I'm trying to think about why they say them. But at minimum, people can put in a little bit of respect and effort regardless of their skill level. Where's the JJK hoodie from? Look up like a high neck gothic hoodie, that's kind of what I was searching for and that should help you. I got the pin from just like some craft store and I pinned it on there. Weird how you didn't talk about moras. Syllables in Japanese are all the same length. I am not attacking this commenter, I'm simply adding to the discussion and relating it to prior experiences. Part of being an effective communicator is not just understanding a topic, but knowing when and how to relay that information relating to that topic. So knowing that a lot of my followers and criticisms are from the US and cannot speak Japanese, it would have been very disadvantageous to give an entire linguistics and Japanese lesson and also start giving new definitions for terms they've never even heard of, and they would just be even more confused and even more aggressive. Kind of piggybacking off of that, one really common experience I have while being online, which we can tell by the people who are trying to correct me, is that people will come to me lacking nuance and bad faith, assuming that because I did not explicitly say something that I either have never thought of it or don't understand it. It's often very frustrating and draining to feel like you have to explain yourself more and more and more, so you have to learn to make boundaries. If you've ever watched my regular content that is cosplay content, you know that I throw in a lot of details and references, and I do a lot of research. But that side of me does not turn off when I'm not making content. I'm always thinking about things. I just have a limited word count, I have limited attention spans, and I have limited time and energy. So I think it's important as people who consume media and talk to people who create media that we remember to approach people with curiosity and not aggression. This was a very well put together video, and I love these deep breakdown types of videos from you as well. Good news for you, I am trying to do more of these. That is my goal for this year, to do more talking, tutorial, breakdown, random life story, cosplay videos. I'm going to try to do at least once a week while also doing my regular cosplay content because I do want to start just sharing more about myself and the world to other people. So I'm really glad that you all enjoyed this.